Welcome to Section 4 of Editor Scripting UI. In this section, we're going to learn more about writing editor scripts. We'll also create menu items and look at how to create a variation of the text element from the Create menu. While we're doing that, we're going to look at what to consider when creating UI from the menu. And to finish, we'll be making a master style script that will style our elements when they're being created. So, on to our first video, extending Unity's UI. In this video, we're going to be creating editor scripts and we're going to add an item to the Create menu. Let's open up Unity. In the Scenes folder under Section 4, we have a Section 4 Start Scene, which I'll open here. Our objective for this video is to add an item to the Create menu so that when you go to Create, UI, Paragraph, Unity will create a paragraph item on one of our canvases. Or, if no canvases exist, create a new canvas and set the paragraph as a child. To do this, we're going to create what's called an editor script. An editor script is something that only runs in the editor. So when you actually create your game, the code in that script won't be accessible and, in fact, won't be included in the final built application. The first thing we need to do is create an editor folder in the root of our assets. All editor scripts need to be inside a folder called editor, though the editor folders can be inside any other folder in your project, and there can be as many of them as you want. Inside that folder, we can right-click and choose Create C# Script. I'm going to call this script Create UI Item. Once that's been created, open it up in Visual Studio. Since this is an editor script and not used in the game, we can delete the monobehavior inheritance keyword after the class name, along with the colon, and also delete the update and start functions, as we won't be using them. We're also going to need to add a using statement to the top of the script to use the Unity editor namespace. So this is a basic C# class in Unity. We're going to need a function to be called when our menu item is pressed, so create one now, making it static and return void. It doesn't matter what you call this, so I'm just going to call it create paragraph. For the minute, this is just going to log out a message saying created a paragraph. The way we want to be able to use this function is by going to the Game Object, UI menu, and choosing a menu item called paragraph. On the line directly above this function, we'll need to add what's called an attribute. Use the square brackets and inside type the word menu item. This gets passed a string parameter that defines where the menu item is in the menus. For example, if we were to pass in Enhancing Unity UI / create paragraph, we can go back into Unity and see that a new menu item will be created with those names. When we click it, we'll get the console message saying created paragraph. Using / lets you order the menu items by submenus. We can use pre-existing menus as well, so change this to Game Object / UI / paragraph. We can put it inside the menu in the editor, and the same thing will be accessible from the Create menu on the hierarchy. Now we can focus on what we want this function to do. When we call it, we basically want to do the same thing that the text option does, creating a new text component on the currently selected canvas, or the first one in the scene, or creating a new canvas if one doesn't exist. It would also set this text center aligned on the parent canvas and set up the default text options such as font, size, color, and material. We could create this using a prefab, but for now we're going to create that through code. Create a new game object, G is equal to new game object, and pass in the name as a parameter. I'm going to call it paragraph. If we go back into Unity now and choose Create UI Paragraph from the drop-down menu, it's just going to create an empty game object called paragraph in the root of the project. This is essentially the same as calling create empty game object. What we want is to add a text element to this. So let's add in the using unityengine.ui statement at the top of our script, and then on the next line in our function say g.addComponentText. This will add in an empty text component. Let's get a reference to that while we're creating it, and now we can set the text on it when it's created too. I'll set it to new paragraph. Back in Unity, create the paragraph again, choosing UI.paragraph, and it will have a rect transform instead of a transform component now, because we've added the text component to it, which also has its text set to new paragraph. It'll default the font to Arial with a font size of 14 and the color will be white. Other than that, it's mostly the same as the created text element from the menu, except that it's not being rendered because it's not a child of the canvas. What we really want is for this text to be set as a child of a canvas in the scene, and we want it to be smart, so that if we're selecting this canvas, it will set it as a child of this canvas. If it's not selected any canvas, we should try and find a canvas in the scene and set it as a child of that. Or, if there aren't any canvases, create one and use that as its parents. This way, the text will always show up when we create a paragraph. It's good to have all options covered. Back in our script, we'll set this on the last line by calling g.transform.setParent, and we'll make an empty transform t above it to use in the function. We'll also pass in false as a second parameter, so that the position gets reset to 0, 0, 0 when it's parented. T isn't set to anything. We could make this not so clever and just set t equal to whatever the current selection is. Selection is a class in the Unity engine namespace that we can use for this. Set it to selection.activeTransform or .activeGameObject.transform. I've accidentally used the variable name t twice here, so set it to p instead and pass it to the setParent function. This will work if we're selecting a canvas. But if we're not selecting anything, it'll throw an error and set it to be the root of the hierarchy, because there is no selected transform. So what we want to do is find a canvas. We'll use an if statement to see if the selected object is null, or if it doesn't have a canvas component. If both of these are false, we'll set b to be the selected object, since it exists and has a canvas component. Otherwise, we can use the findObjectOfType function on the GameObject class to find the first canvas object in the scene and use the transform on that. And if there isn't, we'll create one using new GameObject called canvas.addComponent canvas and set its render mode to screen space while we're at it, so that we can see the canvas when it's created. This is actually exactly what Unity does when you create a text component if there's no canvas in the scene. So with this code, if there are no canvases, we'll create one, and if there is a canvas, we'll use that as the parent. Otherwise, if this selected object is a canvas, we'll use the transform of that. One last thing we want to do is set this created item as a selected object, so we can see where it was made. Add a line at the end that sets selection.activeGameObject equal to g. Now, going back to Unity, we can test this out. With our full screen canvas selected, we can create a paragraph object on this object. If we don't select it, it will find the first canvas in the scene, which happens to be the world space canvas on our shop sign. And that's the basics of editor scripting when it comes to UI. We covered how to create an editor script, how to create a text item from the Create menu, as well as how to make sure it's set as a child of a canvas in the scene.